Domain is the set of all input values. The domain is any value that we could put into the function to find an output. We saw earlier that we could look at the input of 3 and get an output value, but we could not get an input value of 4.5 or 4.5 and find an output value. The domain is the shadow created by the graph of the function. Everything underneath is in the domain. In this graph, the domain is all values between 0 hours and 4 hours, because these are all the different values that we could put into the function to find an output value. Range is the set of all output values. These are all the possible outcomes for the function. The range quantity in this example was megabits per second. The range is all values between 10 megabits per second and 40 megabits per second because these are the values that the graph can get to. We saw earlier that this graph was never at 45 megabits per second. Let's check for understanding. Which values are not in the range of the function? How do you know? 5 megabits per second, 13 megabits per second, 25 megabits per second, 50 megabits per second. Blank are not in the range of the function because 5 megabits per second and 50 megabits per second are not in the range of the function because the download speed was never 5 megabits per second or 50 megabits per second. 5 megabits per second would be down here in this region, and the graph shows that the download speed never gets lower than 10. 50 megabits per second is way up here. The graph never gets up to 50 megabits per second either. However, 13 and 25 are values that were recorded on this graph.